Donald, a pleasure to meet you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon, Chris.
I'm fascinated because to talk to you about vested and the vested model, because I think you come from a very different perspective, as you come from particularly from an IT background. Is that fair?
Yes, my background, it's a combination of legal and IT. I was an in-house lawyer with an IT consultancy for a number of years, then moved into a commercial director role where I became a proponent of vested because I thought the opportunities in the IT world were great.
Oh, that's interesting. And how did you find the vested approach? What appealed about the vested approach?
I think it was the possibility for joint gains. I found, particularly in the IT world, everyone talks about win-win, gain share, and no one actually lives it. Gain share just means cut costs a bit more slowly or improve productivity quicker. But the possibility of actually collaboratively working together really appealed to me. And I found latterly, particularly with the rise of the cloud and the cloud-enabled services like artificial intelligence, automation, where IT was becoming much more of a delivery element for the business rather than just a cost center. I thought it really lent itself to the vested model.
And I think that's the fascinating thing, because I think most people think IT is about control, because everything about IT seems to be about control. So to talk about vested is actually almost a contradiction, isn't it?
It is, but part of it's just the changing shape of IT, particularly, as I say, with the cloud-enabled services, the fact that artificial intelligence is taking on so much, automation is taking on so much. I worked in a digital transformation center where they were doing some really cutting-edge stuff that was making a massive difference, everything from how you maintained wind turbines to being able to solve IT issues in oil rigs, or set up servers remotely in 5 minutes rather than 5 weeks.
Yeah, no, I can understand that. And I mean, it is this whole movement at the moment, is it, towards open collaboration seems to be happening greater and greater at this point in time?
Yes, I think IT is behind the curve a bit. I think the proponents, people who actually work in IT think it's great. We found the challenges were more at the procurement and the legal levels, where it was, this is all very nice, particularly when you combine it with agile approaches to development, where they're saying it's all very good, but where's my deliverables, where's my project plan, and where's my guaranteed cost savings?
I think that's the interesting piece about the legal piece. How do you write it into a contract as well?
I think there's two elements. Certainly with the way I was working, there were two elements. One was just the vested element, which had its own approach. The other was, how do you write agile contracting? Because it is so very different. Where you basically evolves almost in 2-week cycles, rather than having a massive 5-year project with a scope set up in day one is probably at the moment out of date by the end of week one.
And what are your feelings overall about the project you went through?
And the main one I worked on didn't end up doing a vested model. We started down the track, and it was with a very large power company in continental Europe. And they loved the concept. We did the compatibility and trust assessment, which provided massive insights. We did a contract review, which again provided some examples of some holes. But it was always, I say, the management got a bit of cold feet. First of all, because they were working very differently, because they're working an agile methodology. And on top of that, doing this vested contracting model was just a bit much for them, partly because of the volume of change it required to do, the management of that change within their organization, and the fact that it wasn't just something you could dabble in. You either had to go all in and train your people in it to get the result, rather than just something that you could experiment with.
Yeah. And do you believe vested is going to become more prevalent as we go forward now?
I think it has to. I think IT is leaving a whole lot of opportunity on the table if it doesn't. I think there's some, excuse the pun, vested interests who are we're happy to stick with the status quo, but I think if they really want to get the value out of the business change that IT can enable, then vested definitely becomes where they have to go.
Now, there are obviously natural cynics about the vested. There are natural cynics about the vested model as well, saying, "Look, it's just about behaviours. Do you need the training?" Your thoughts on that?
Sorry,
Sorry, there are some. Don't worry. There are some natural cynics about the vested model, saying, "Do we really need training on this? Do you need to have the processes as pronounced as they are. But it is about how you develop behaviors, isn't it?
It is. A lot of it is just around you managing the change. I believe that vested, there is almost a sliding scale from slightly collaborative through to full vested. And in my view, you can stop off at different points along the scale without necessarily going into the full financial model. But it does require to have sponsorship right from the top, that they're going to implement that change and stand by it.
Now the UK has been quite slow embracing vested.
Yeah.
So far, do you see change in the UK? Do you think the UK will get more involved in vested?
I think it will. I mean, everyone I've spoken to says it's a great idea, but it's not for me just yet. I think they're waiting to see who makes the first move. There's more show me that it works rather than let me be the first.
And how's the pandemic impacted, do you think, on all this conversation?
To be fair, I haven't been in this scene for about the last 6 months or so. So how it's gone then, I'm not sure. If being perfectly honest about it, I've moved on from the last technology company I worked in at that point. They liked the concept, but even so, to wind back a bit, I'm talking as if it is the customers who are sort of holding up vested. I think, frankly, I'm not sure the IT companies themselves are particularly ready for it or open to it for much the same reasons as the customers, and that it seems like a wholesale change. It feels like they have to rewrite all the rule books, and there's just a reluctance to do something a bit different.
And when you've gone about learning about vested, where did you go? Can I ask?
I went over to Knoxville, to Tennessee.
And how did you find that?
I thought it was fantastic. I was there for the week course, which the 2 sessions, and I just thought it was eye-opening. And you come away with your head full of knowledge, but almost more questions than answers as well, because you realise there are so many directions it can go in.
I mean, that's the interesting thing about this, isn't it? Sorry.
Yes. And I think with people like the coaches, and we worked with David Freelinger, who was one of the faculty there, and the deal that we were on, we got David to come in as the coach, which was, again, hugely helpful. And to have, I call them the faculty, like Kate and David, who are there, and you can pick up the phone to them, you can get them to join calls to help guide the process, not actually take a side as such, but just to help you both through the collaborative process, is massively helpful.
And Kate is an incredible advocate for vested, isn't she?
Yes, she's brilliant. The dedication she has to promoting it and implementing it is fantastic.
And then when you came back, it's interesting again, isn't it? Because I'm finding that America is taking it on, and the Nordic countries seem to have taken it, or Northern Europe's taking it on, but it's been almost kind of pockets rather than widespread. Is that fair?
Yes, I agree completely. But I think it is just a reluctance to embrace the change because it is quite wholesale. I think everyone thinks we should try it, but I'd like to see someone else try it first, as I mentioned. And you think, what does this mean? How do I sell this to the CFO that I'm not guaranteeing him a cost in year 3?
Yeah, no, I understand that. And what would be your advice to anyone, big company looking at taking on vested? What would be your words of wisdom?
I would say invest, and even if you just send a couple of champions to the course and say, we're going to spend a little bit of cash getting 2 reasonably senior people, whether it's in sales, legal, procurement, or whatever, to go on the course with the backing of the top management of the company, and say, come back and let's see if we can set up, what we're planning to do is a vested centre of excellence in the company. How do we identify clients who would be suitable for it? How do we identify deals who will be suitable for it? Because we believe, as IT providers, we now have the technologies that can change the game for the customer. Let's put our money and some of our resources behind it rather than just sit in the sidelines and watch.
And the biggest barriers you found to vested when you're working on a project?
Some of it's the collaboration can be a bit difficult for people. They're so used to adversarial positions. Actually being completely collaborative and collegiate can be a bit countercultural. And I think people say it seems like an awful lot of change to put in at once. So I think that's probably the biggest barriers. And I will say you can't make people change, but you can create the right environment and invite people to change. And I think the corporations are going to say, yeah, right, we want to create the right environment that we can change internally, and we can encourage our customers to change, because the potential for joint gains here is enormous.
And look, and as you pointed out, it's not for everybody, is it, vested?
No, in some situations, frankly, it's not necessary. I think if you're doing almost like a commodity transaction, then you're wasting time doing vested. If you have the chance to make big business change, and if you have the chance that you can work together to jointly realize gains, then I think you're right in the sweet spot for it.
And what are your hopes for the future regarding vested?
I mean, I hope there is one IT company says, yeah, we are running with this, because I think once the floodgates open, there will be no stopping it, and it will. I believe it will become the norm at some point in the future. It's just how far away that point is.
It's really interesting, isn't it? Because in some ways, IT is all about control, but you're right; it's also about collaboration at the heart of it, isn't it?
Yes, and particularly the outsourcing transactions, when the staff are more or less the same before and after. They may just have transferred employer. People managing it on both sides are the same, and you can probably cut out at least one layer of management in a vested deal, because you're working towards the joint goals.
And I guess the IT industry is going through the same change as everybody else, isn't it, during this period of time?
Yes, very much so. What was offshoring is now becoming onshoring, but much smaller groups with much more specialist skills, as I mentioned earlier, working agilely and really saying, if you do a process more than twice, just automate it.
It makes logical sense. Oh, look, Donald, thank you so much for your time today. That was a really interesting insight, so thank you.
No, thank you. Hopefully that was helpful.
Very helpful indeed. Thank you very much indeed.
Good.